are you a spiritual person? Is that part of sort of your drive and your ability to focus in on these tasks that other human beings get anxiety simply watching your Instagram clips?
No, so I'm very much an atheist. I would not characterize myself as spiritual in any way. And the thing is, I mean, I'm as afraid of death as anybody else, but to me, the benefits of climbing, sort of the beauty of the experience, is worth the risk, basically. And basically the whole challenge of free soloing, the type of climbing that I do sometimes, is to mitigate that risk in a way that, I feel comfortable, that I don't feel afraid, that it's, that it doesn't seem scary because I'm confident that I won't fall off. I mean, basically it's all about finding the confidence to know that you can do something without it being dangerous.
When's the moment for you where you sense that I got this? This is what I do. I'm really special at this.
The thing about climbing is that every rock is different. I mean, it sounds stupid, but every rock is different. Every mountain is different. So you never have a moment where I've got this, because it's not like a free throw. It's not like a replicable action that you do every single day, day in and day out. The thing about climbing is, and also the weather changes every day, conditions change, like your skin changes, like basically it always feels a little bit different. So even when you build confidence, build skills, as your abilities increase, you may feel better for certain objectives, but for other objectives, you're like, oh, I don't know, so like something like free soloing El Cap, if you've seen the film Free Solo,
Yes,
like
of course. Yeah.
years, I climbed El Cap, felt great when I did it. But if I went there right now and looked up at the wall, I'd be like, oh, that looks pretty scary. Even though I think, I'm arguably a better, more experienced climber now than I was a couple years ago. I've been like training nonstop since then as well. But the thing is, I'm not current for that specific route. I don't remember every single move. I remember a lot of it. And if I was forced to free solo it, like, I'd probably be fine. But it'd be very scary. I'd be like, oh, geez, I haven't been practicing for the last 2 years.
The focus it would take to do something like that, I would imagine you can't daydream, that you have to be so hyper focused throughout this, which, by the way, that in itself is a remarkable skill.
Yeah, that's definitely true for the high end, very difficult free soloing. So on something like El Cap, probably a third of the face is incredibly difficult, and I had to stay hyper focused like you're describing. But for the easier sections, I very much can look around, enjoy the view, appreciate the position. For the very difficult situations, I have to focus, but not every situation on a rock face is physical limit. Some of it is actually easy terrain, like walking across little ledges or like going up sort of easy cracks. And those are the times where I can appreciate the whole thing, because at some point it has to be enjoyable as well. You have to have moments of pure fun, or else that's the point.
Was there a moment for you felt like, I think I can get to different places than other people?
Not exactly. I mean, it's interesting because actually, so when you're climbing with other people, you're mostly focused on physical difficulty. So like when I'm climbing with friends at the gym, we're training like physical limits. And when you look at physical limits like that, I'm actually not any better than most of my friends. Like, I mean, and most of my other friends are professional climbers. And for the most part, they're stronger than me in most measures of pure strength. But the thing that I have is sort of the psychological, and really what I have is like the desire to go on big adventures and to sort of push myself in the mountains. And so in some ways, when I'm with friends, I'm always kind of the one that's like, oh, I'm not really quite as good as them. But it's kind of when I'm by myself that I shine, when I get into the situations where I'm like, oh, I'm uniquely good at things that I do by myself. So I never really had a moment where I was like, oh, I'm like better than my friends in some way. It was more like I would consistently go adventuring by myself and get into these situations where I'm like, oh, what a crazy adventure. I just did something kind of rad. And then when you tell people about it later, then they're like, whoa, like, what'd you do? And then that sort of became, then you're like, oh, I guess I'm doing things that other people don't like to do. And then it sort of became a thing.
Is there a downside to now being famous? Is there part of your life you'll never get back?
Well, yeah, losing the anonymity.
Yeah.
Like today, like I was saying, I just came from climbing outside, and like the various other groups of hikers and climbers that we passed are all like, whoa, what are you doing here? What are you up to? And, I'm kind of like, I live here, like I'm just out with my family, like at a normal day in the canyons, so right. Like losing that sense of anonymity. Sure, it's hard to say that.
It is.
In the outdoors. I mean, I don't know, but overall, I mean, the positives far outweigh that, I think, because Like I have a foundation that supports solar projects around the world, and that work has just totally blown up since the film. We've been like this last year, we've given over $1 million to different projects around the world, and that's basically like because of the visibility from the film. And it's just it's nice to be able to make a living as a climber. It's pretty incredible to be able to do something that you love to do and make a living from it. And I'm totally into that.
Do you envision, Alex, a moment where you won't want the intensity? Perhaps you have kids.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, do you sense that is part of this book?
Yeah, I don't know if there'll be a moment where I just suddenly flip the switch, but I imagine sort of a gradual diminishing of the intensity, because I'll always love to solo and I'll always love to scramble in the mountains. But at some point, I won't want to do very hard scrambles. I won't want to do like the really intense free soloing. I'll just be doing the kind of casual stuff. I imagine. I don't know. I mean, and in some ways, I might eventually lose the hunger for like constantly pushing myself, because even now, I'm like, it is sometimes a bit of a grind to just like think up hard challenges and be like, can I do those? And then basically whip yourself into shape until you manage to do those. And then think up an even harder challenge and do that. And you're sort of like, oh, it does feel a little bit like a treadmill where like the faster you go, the faster the treadmill goes. And you're like, yeah, like right now I'm kind of working on this project in Red Rock, outside of Vegas.
Yeah.
Actually, well, you might be able to appreciate this. I'm sort of working on a traverse of the entire range. So basically like up and over every peak down the entire Red Rock range. But tagging all the climbing, like basically tagging all the summits, but also doing as many climbing routes along the way as possible. So it's basically a link up that combines every mountain and every classic climb in Red Rock all into one incredible push. And so in theory, it would take me somewhere from like 24 to 36 hours or something to do all that of like continuous climbing. And it's like tiring to even think about, And I'm just like, oh, that's a lot of exercise. That's a lot of effort. And then it's like, if I do something like that, then you're like, well, what's even bigger? What's even harder? You're like, oh, geez, like, I don't know, like it used to be enough for me to just go climb one route in Red Rock. I'd be like, oh, cool. I had a great day in the canyons. I climbed this big cliff. Now I'm like talking about enchaining every single route. And you're sort of like, that's a lot of effort,
Are there people in your sphere of fearlessness that you look at and think, wow, that is a handful? I don't know if I could go there.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, in some ways, it's people that are slightly outside of my sphere. Like when I think of motorsports or something like motocross or like Formula One racing or things like that, I see that and I'm like, that seems dangerous, like cars blown up and people wrecking at super high speeds. And honestly, just the incredibly fast reaction times, because climbing is actually very slow and very controlled, very methodical. Like the thing is, when I'm free soloing, if I hesitate at all, it's fine. For the most part, I can just hang there for a minute, think about it, relax, take some deep breaths, and then carry on. It's a very slow paced activity, like all about control of the body. When I think of something like racing, I'm like, that's all about split section, reactions and just like incredible speed. And I'm like, oh, that kind of stresses me out to think about. Like that seems scary.
Young kids look up to you. Are you comfortable, or is there slight discomfort, helping young kids do it and knowing there's elements to what they are inspired by what you do that are dangerous?
Yeah, though I try to make a very clear distinction between risk and and consequence. So what you're saying, when you're saying what I do is dangerous, and I would feel very comfortable talking to any kid about this, because I think it's an important distinction in all things in life. That kids, if they're inspired to do something, they should think about the potential consequences, and then they should think of the likelihood of those consequences occurring, and then they should sort of do the mental math as to whether or not something is worth it or not. Because most people take risk in their life in ways that they don't really anticipate and they didn't really choose to. Like if you think of somebody going out to the bars on a Friday night, like they're not really thinking through their risk taking for the evening, but it's like they're probably going to have a few drinks, and then they might drive home a little bit tipsy, or they might stay out way too late and then drive home really, really tired. But either way, they're taking on risk that they didn't necessarily sign up for. They didn't choose like, this is a risk that's worth taking in my life. They're just kind of like falling into it. And I would very much encourage any child to think through the risks that they take in their life. And I think that's totally appropriate. The thing about free soloing is that it's all about managing risk. And I think that that's a skill that people should apply to all aspects of life, really.